We're going to talk about a series of phenomena of Yemos HaMashiach over the next series of lectures, based on what the Rebbe Melech Mashiach said on Yud Tes Kislev, Tav Shenun Beis, that we are now in Yemos HaMashiach. B'yameinu Eila Yemos HaMashiach Shabem Nimtzoim Achshov. These days, Yemos HaMashiach that we're now in, V'tzrichim rak liftoach es ha'inayim. All we have to do is open our eyes. V'oz roim shnimtzes kavar ha'gula mitis v'shlema b'pashtus. Then we see that the gula mitis v'shlema, the true and complete gula, is already here, literally. So we have to do that. We have to talk about this. Open our eyes, look at the world, see what's going on in the world, and see where we see the gula and how we see the gula. One of the most obvious things, which I would say you don't even have to open your eyes to see. It's blatantly in front of you. The only thing is you have to not close your eyes to ignore it. And that is the phenomenon called swords into plowshares. On Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim Tav Shenun Beis, the Rebbe Melech Mashiach devoted a whole sikha to this, a whole farbrengen. Because the day before, Erev Shabbos, there was a major meeting in the United Nations, a meeting on the level that had never taken place before. All the heads of state of the members of the 15 members of the Security Council met in New York in the United Nations building, and this included the superpowers, United States and Russia after the fall of communism, major European countries, China, and all of them together made this joint declaration that they're going to begin a new era of international relations. An era which is not focused on conflict and competition, but an era which is focused on mutual respect, mutual assistance, and activities that are beneficial for all of mankind. All this, the Melech Mashiach said, is the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecy of Yeshayahu Novi, in the second parak of Yeshayahu, where he says, "V'hoya b'achris hayomim," it's going to happen at the end of days, meaning in Yemos HaMashiach, and there's a few psukim describing what the world is going to be like, and near the end, Yeshayahu says about the nations of the world. All the nations of the world will focus on Moshiach, and v'chitzu charvosam le'itim v'chanisosem lemazmeros. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. In other words, they'll take all of their military equipment and transform it for peaceful uses, agricultural uses, but also more generally economic uses that benefit the sustenance of the world. The ability of mankind to sustain itself, to eat, to be healthy, and to prosper. That's v'chitzu chavosim le'itim. That's swords into plowshares. Now in the Sikha, the Rebbe Melech Mashiach explains that this is no coincidence, no accident that they met in the United Nations. Fact is, the United Nations, in its good days, when it was set up, it was based on this principle. It was supposed to be an institution to bring about such changes in the world. There is what's called the Isaiah Wall in the United Nations, where this pasuk in English is a major wall, kind of a curved wall, where this pasuk is written on, engraved in the wall. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and so on. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn any more war. So what we are going to do in the next few lectures is talk about different things in the world that we can see. Again, not talking about any special eye-opening activities. You don't need a penetrating analytical look for this. All you got to do is read the right newspapers. Read the right. So in the next few sessions we're going to talk about certain things that one can see in the world just by reading the right newspapers and the right journals and not closing our eyes to the realities of the world. different things going on in the world where we can see the transformation of nations and transformation of technologies into peaceful uses. I've written about this extensively in my book, Scientific Thought in Messianic Times, chapter 3. And over there I divided it into 3 sections, 3 categories. There's what we can see how the nations of the world themselves have changed. There's how we can see many military technologies having been transformed to peaceful uses from their original militaristic use. And finally, we've investigated the whole issue of global security and raised the question, has the world become more safe? The answer is yes. And how can we see that the world is more safe? What do we see and where do we see it? There are many actually academic and secular institutions investigating the same thing that we're talking about, the changes in the world towards away from militaristic towards peaceful. And these are not organizations with any religious ideas or any religious agendas. These are just like, political science investigations. What's the state of the world? There's a center in Germany called BICC, Bonn International Center for Conversion, which is documenting the conversion of military technology to peaceful uses. There is a report published since 2005 called the Human Security Report, part of what's called the Human Security Project. So they've been publishing almost annually a report on global security, Human Security Report, documenting what the situation is with wars in the world, people dying in wars, the duration of wars, and to their own surprise, their own shock, they've discovered, just checking the numbers and the statistics, that it's all going down. The number of wars is going down, the number of people dying in wars is going down, and the duration of wars is going down. Since when? Well, since Swords into Plowshares, since around 1992, when this declaration was made in the United Nations, and which the Rebbe Melech Moshiach identified as V'chitzu Chavosam Itim, transformation of swords into plowshares. I will just mention one thing right now about the nations of the world, which occurred right after the meeting at the United Nations, right after the Rebbe Melech Moshiach's announcement that this was swords into plowshares. Literally days later, the next week, while President Boris Yeltsin, the president of Russia, was still in the United States from this meeting, he met with President George Bush Sr. in Camp David, and they started to plan to establish a center in Moscow called ISTC, the International Science and Technology Center. The purpose of this center was, since Russia was now moving away from its militaristic, and Russia was the most militaristic country in the world for decades, since Russia was now going to move away from that and move towards peaceful and economic interests, what was going to happen with all these scientists? Tens of thousands of scientists and technicians who were working for military projects, working for the military, now they were going to be unemployed. It wasn't just a issue of finding jobs for people, for unemployed scientists. It was an issue of security, of global security, making sure that especially the high-level scientists, and they identified that there were 60,000 scientists, high-level scientists at risk for this, making sure that these scientists are not given lucrative offers from third world countries who are not yet on board with the swords and the plowshares. Some of them are still not on board, Aryeh. But making sure that they don't siphon away these unemployed Russian scientists to work on military projects in their country. Maybe you have a nuclear scientist in Russia who is now not working on atomic bombs anymore, but maybe the guys in Libya or the guys in Iran are looking for someone to work on atomic bombs for them. You see, that was the issue. And they were successful at it. They set up this institute and put these scientists to work in their fields. The knowledge that they had gained from working on the military projects would be used now for peaceful things. Just a few examples. The nuclear scientist who was trained in nuclear reactions and for military purposes, many of them were put to work designing safe nuclear reactors, which was something very lacking in Russia. They had nuclear reactors, but they were very lax on safety. And everybody knows the famous accident at Chernobyl, the meltdown of the nuclear reactor there. That wasn't the only one. That was just the most dramatic one that made news all over the world. Other scientists, like aeronautical engineers who may have been working on military aircraft, were put to work on civilian aircraft,